Ikajikwe, good morning, everyone. My name is Harmony. My ancestral name is Setlakis, and I'm from the Tla'amin Nation. And I'm going to go through the first of our suite of tools, the data capacity assessment. So the purpose of this tool is really like recognizing that each of our governments are coming to this work with a whole range of different needs and capacities when it comes to collecting, using, storing, archiving data. Most of us, because we're self-governing Indigenous governments, have some form of laws that govern aspects of data governance. So for example, I think most have privacy laws or protection of personal information laws. However, not all will have laws for things like data collection or data sharing. And maybe they don't need laws, maybe they need policies. Each of us are coming from a very different place. There's a whole range of different organizational cultures around the use of data to inform decisions. Some kind of go there right at the beginning, like, well, what are the data telling us? Whereas others rely on other ways and other pathways for making decisions. Some have greater use of technology and systems, where others are relying on paper-based systems. So everybody's coming in with a different starting point, and we want to honor that starting point and support this toolkit to meet each self-governing Indigenous government where they are at. So what this tool does is help each SDIG understand their current state of data capacity, their current state of readiness for change. And this is like the first step on like knowing what your pathway looks like from there. So this is the tool that supports that step. It is also both an assessment tool and a planning tool. And so SDIGs will need to think about, like, do you want to just use it for assessment? Totally fine. Do you want to use it to support planning? Also totally fine. So let's kind of go through the tool and show you what it's all about. So when you enter the site, this is our site entry protocol. We read that, we consider it, we express gratitude for the awesome work that this group has done. Then we accept the invitation. We go into the Applied Tools tab. We could navigate directly to it if we wish, or we can go through this tab to the capacity assessment. So this is, now I'm gonna have to reshare my screen. When you click the download, you will need to enable macros to get the full functionality of this tool. You'll see there are 3 tabs to this tool. So the first provides an orientation. This is kind of what I just talked about already, so I'm not going to repeat it, but you don't need to listen to this webinar every time you want to use this tool. The instructions are nicely here already in the document itself. So that's tab 1, orientation. What is this tool? Tab 2 is, what is the model that we're using to assess capacity? And so we've elaborated on that here. It's built on the data governance tool that is the subject of another webinar video, and which is another tool in this overall toolbox. We're going to talk about that in another session. So the message here is that all of these tools are interrelated and they all talk to each other. So this assessment is should be pretty straightforward. It's a kind of like 5 by 5. So we have 5 kind of levels of capacity from beginning to maturing. So beginning is kind of like, we're pretty much getting started in this area. We're ready to get going and to think about this work, but our current capacity, it's the starting point. Or emerging, we built a bit of capacity and we're interested in keeping going. Learning, we're developing, we're like kind of getting close to medium capacity. Developing, kind of further maturity, and then all the way to 5, which is like we're at the point where we're just in a cycle of maturing our capacity. You'll see that none of this is like mission accomplished. Like data governance, no one has a perfect data governance system. This is an ongoing evolution and it's an ongoing piece of work and it's an ongoing journey we're all on. And so this is not like check, done. So that's the 5 factors in our assessment. And then we have 5 kind of categories or domains. The first is data governance. Like, to what degree do we have a data governance framework that we are working in? The second is people and partners. Whether we have staff, whether we have agreements with other partners that support our work in data governance and support our implementation. Then we have tools and IT systems. So the same kind of idea, but with respect to systems. To what degree does our infrastructure support our aims in data governance? And then analytics capabilities. To what degree do we like do data collection, do data analysis and reporting, and use the outcomes to inform our work? And then finally, organizational culture. To what degree do we have a culture in our organization of using data to inform decision-making? And to what degree is there good awareness and uptake of laws and policy that might be in place? So that's like kind of like the 5x5 model for the assessment. That must be teeny tiny on your screen. Let me bump that up. So what we have here then is, it should be pretty obvious. This is now the matrix, drawing that 5x5 together into a tool that we can actually work through and use at the desk. So this is the one, this is really the tab you'll be using. The thing to kind of orient you to here is that, like I said, this tool has 2 parts. There's an assessment component and a planning component. So tabs B through E are the assessment component of the tool. Where are we at today? So what's our current level? Why? And then some details. And then columns F through I are the planning components of the tool. Where do we want to be? What next steps do we need to take, and by when? And then there's a tab that links you to all of the toolkit resources that exist for each of these areas, so that you can draw down the correct tools to support you in advancing your current state to your desired future state. So before I go through like a bit of a demo on how to use this, just some like tips or ways of thinking about using this tool. One is that SGIGs should really feel free to take their time to complete this. This is probably not something that's best done in one sitting by one person at one desk. This is best done in thinking about a cross-organizational, team-based approach. Like, it's a broad tool. So if you want to do this, you kind of want to like draw in all the subject matter experts that exist within your government. Folks in IMIT, folks in senior administration. At the same time, for consistency in terms of like one human brain, being consistent in the approach taken, it's probably best for one person to be like the pen using this tool. It can be done in groups. That is also like something that can be engaging and build some comprehension and build a bit of momentum and organizational understanding about data. If you have the ability to fill this out in a bit of a process in groups with subject matter experts, with others in your organization. You can also just pick one part. Like if you're like, we're really just interested in understanding where we're at in our culture or our people and partners, then just do that one part. So you can kind of like choose your own adventure with this thing. You can also, like I said, use this just for assessment or use it for assessment and planning. If you do plan to use it for planning as a planner, I would recommend finish the whole assessment first. Get all of your current state in place, and then undertake planning so that you can balance the trade-offs and do that prioritization. Because there's a risk otherwise, if you go row by row, that everything's going to be like, well, we want to be a 5 on everything, and we want to be a 5 on everything by this time next year. And that's not realistic. And that's not setting ourselves up for the recognition that data governance is an ongoing journey. It's not a destination. So in this work, it's best to, if you want to use this for planning purposes, complete the whole assessment, And then it might be a bit of a different group that is involved in kind of like, okay, based on everything we're at, what are our key priorities in growth or in maturity? And like, what are our budget and timelines that are factors that we need to consider in thinking about work planning moving forward? My last kind of contextual point is that it's often helpful to do this work within the context of an actual project as opposed to in the abstract. It can feel a bit like, why are we doing this if you don't have kind of a project that's driving it? So for example, in projects that we've done, for example, in running surveys or census projects within certain self-governing Indigenous governments, they use this assessment to inform their starting point to understand what capacities do we need to have in place in order to complete this project. Or we want to do this project, what are all of the infrastructure we need to have in place and be moving alongside this project so that we're like really leveling up in our data governance as a result of doing something that we want to do because we want those data at the end. So having a bit of a focal point project can help. Okay, so let's just walk through one row of this tool. So let's just start with the first one, data governance, vision, goals, and principles. The kind of core question here is your government guided by some sort of overarching vision, goals, or principles that support your work in data use, data governance, or data sovereignty? So if I was filling this out for my own nation, for example, I would say we're a 2. And I would say that because, well, we don't have a data governance strategy with a clear vision and principles specifically to data governance, we do have a comprehensive plan. And that comprehensive plan shares a broad vision for our government overall. And it draws in the principles of our systems and our ways of thinking as a people to guide our work. And so we have a starting point. And so I would write that in, right? We have a CNP which describes our overall vision and our knowledge principles as a people. I'm going to do the thing that I told you not to do, which is go through the whole row, but pretend I have the rest of it filled out. Okay, so I've done the whole thing. And now I'm like in my planner hat. I'm out of my assessment hat. I'm wearing my planner hat. And I'm saying, okay, where do we want to be? If we're a 2 in vision, goals, and principles, where do we want to be? And I think we want to be a 4. We want to have a set of data-specific principles in place endorsed by leadership and which are starting to take root within our staff. And I say this because we want to increase our policy base for data collection. And in order to do that, we need to have some principles that are guiding our work in that regard. And that's something we don't really have. We have pretty high level vision and some general principles, but we don't have the more specific principles that we would need in a policy to guide people at the desk around things like, how do we make decisions about or on a data informed basis, and how are we expected to use data while protecting personal information and privacy? And what are our processes for collaborating? What are the expectations for how we collaborate in this organization with respect to decisions about data use? So in order to have all of that be put into place, we do need a kind of a root set of understanding. So I think we want to be a 4. And in terms of priority, this is going to be high because it's kind of like the top of everything else we want to do. If we don't have this guidance of these kind of core principles guiding everything, we're going to end up with policies that are all a mishmash and that aren't cascading from the same worldview. And so in our case, our next steps would be to probably undertake some research into other principles we would probably and use these to develop a workshop to design our own principles that can be put into policy. And we probably think that we can do that by end of fiscal. And I'm like, oh, great, look at this. There's a bunch of resources that are available to me to help me with that work. And I can use those to both inform kind of what I've come up with as my plan, as well as implementation of that plan and next steps. So this can be filled out, like I said, kind of for each area or in its totality. And again, just kind of like take your time filling out the assessment. It's really tempting when you have all these cells to just like dump all of our thoughts in there. And I think that is a good starting point, but it also goes a long way to be working kind of as teams within our governments to use this assessment to initiate a kind of a whole of government conversation about the importance of data and what our future vision for data is. And that is the overview of the data capacity assessment tool.